I would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Cultworthy. It's been a few weeks since I've been on air. I've been focusing on my newer project, which I'm about to release about 3 or 4 weeks or so. So be patient as more episodes of the Cultworthy come out. But I'm really happy that I am coming back after this little hiatus with a very special guest. I've got Mr. Jon DiLeo. He is author of 8 books about classic movies. The books are And You Thought You Knew About Classic Movies, 100 Great Film Performances You Should Remember But Probably Don't, Screensavers, 40 Remarkable Movies Awaiting Rediscovery, Tennessee Williams and Company, His Essential Screen Actors, Screensavers 2, My Grab Bag of Classic Movies, 10 Movies at a Time. There's so many more, but the one that I really liked was 40 Overlooked Co-Stars of Oscar-winning performances, which is the one that we are talking about today. I'm blessed that you sent me a copy, and I can't wait to get into it a little bit as we have this conversation. But first of all, thank you for being on the show. And is there anything that I didn't bring up that you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be with you. You read the subtitle beautifully, but the title is not even nominated.
Not even nominated, correct.
Yeah. And also, I apologize for titles that go on forever, but that's, the name of the game is subtitles. They explain your title and you find out suddenly you have 25 words of title. So it's just the way it goes.
One of the things that I say in my podcasting when I go back and listen or edit sometimes is I have a habit of asking a question, but before I let the guest answer, I add a subcategory of questions to my main question. And then they start answering the subcategories. And then I go back and listen. It's like, you know what? I didn't even get an answer to my main question. And that's my fault because I asked 40 mini questions to the main one. I feel like subtitles to titles of books are kind of the same way.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So of all these things that you've written, I can definitely say that you are very much like me, where you are kind of a champion of the underdog and the underappreciated in cinema history, especially in classic cinema. That's your bag, right?
Yeah, exactly. And my love of classic film, goes so far back. But after a while, you've seen all the big ones, by the time, in my case, probably out of my teens, early 20s. And then you're discovering so many others as the years go by. And you realize most of the people even those who really love movies, don't know these movies. And some of them are as good or sometimes better than the ones everyone talks about. And it became sort of, part of the passion of the books was to shine a spotlight on certain movies or have a concept in a book that would, bring some of those titles to light. So yes, it's definitely very much a part of what I've been doing for these more than 25 years now.
It's so impressive. And it's something that I always wished that I would have taken that leap. I'm so insecure about my writing. And I think that's why I did get into podcasting about 5 years ago, is because I feel that once your voice is spoken, you're locked in, right? Like you're having a conversation with someone, even if you don't publish the episode, you've committed to an idea. You can always go back on it, but you've had a conversation with somebody and you've created a dialogue. When I'm writing and I do my little essays and my film reviews, I feel like I'm so self-critical about it because I don't like the sound of my own voice in my writing. And I get hypercritical. And then I give it to someone else to read. And they're like, oh no, that was really good. I'm like, but was it? Are you just humoring me because you're my friend? You don't want to hurt my feelings? I think that's always been my biggest hurdle of getting more into film essay writing, because I'm really into it. And that's why I love reading books like this by people like you.
Thank you. I think I early on I realized the best way for me to do it was to try to write the way I talk.
Right.
So I hope when you're reading me, it's like I'm next to you, just having this conversation where I'm doing all the talking, but it's just what I would be saying, as opposed to thinking of, well, I'm writing a book and it's serious and it should sound like a textbook. It should sound, very definite, and it's more, it's freer and it's truer if you just sort of let it go. And I kind of was lucky because I kind of snuck into it. The first book I did was a quiz book, so there's very little what you'd call writing in it. There's just little descriptive, sentences or two
Mm.
for each quiz, and that gave me the confidence once it got published to think, I think I could write short essays. And then the next one after that was longer. And so it was really about sort of kind of an on the job training kind of thing and sort of trusting myself and thinking I'm actually at my best when I'm just loose and just saying what I felt in my gut, as opposed to trying to sound, say, literary.
Yeah. So little backstory on this podcast, the Cultworthy, and I had another podcast before that I don't publish anymore and I don't produce episodes. But if I did, you'd definitely be one of the main guests. It was called the Cultworthy Classic, where I focused on cultworthy films before 1970. So from essentially the dawn of film till 1970, that's when I covered those movies because I really didn't want to put cinema from the 40s, 50s, and 60s in the same podcast where I'm talking about slasher films of the 80s. I do have more respect for classic cinema that I wanted to give it more attention to that and not mix up my audiences. And I enjoyed doing it. And we spoke about a lot of great films. But one of the things that started me on my podcasting journey is I would just write these little short essays, blogs, and reviews of films of all decades. And then how I started the podcast, I didn't have guests. I didn't have someone sitting across from me in the guest chair. I would just read my essays and my blogs, and that would be the podcast. And then somehow that switched. So if I ever get back into essay writing, maybe it'll be based off of things that were said in a conversation in a podcast. I'll retrofit and go backwards, I guess you could say. But yeah, no, definitely reading books like this gets me hungry again to start putting my words on paper, especially about movies. So let's go ahead and talk about how we got here. So I had an episode with Stephen Nan from Beneath the Hollywood Sign, which is a great podcast about classic movies. You were a guest on their show, and they referred you to me and me to you, and we're going to do something similar. Now, how do you know Stephen Nan? Did they reach out to you, or do you just guys exist in the same circle of film appreciation?
I believe initially I reached out to them probably last summer because this book was coming out in the fall and I was trying to hunt down classic movie podcasts,
Mhm.
and I saw them, wrote to them. Steve knew some of my books, so they responded right away and said, "We'd love to have you on." And I was coming out to LA in November to do a book signing at Book Soup. And I said, "Well, I'm coming out there. Why don't we do it together in the same room?" And they liked that idea. So I was with them in their studio sometime in November. We had a blast, and we've kept up. And then I watched when they were on your show, and the episode was exactly my kind of thing. And
Nice.
you talked about 1940,
Mhm.
and I wrote to them right after. And anyway, it was like, yeah, I have to be on that show. It's so that's how it all happened. Yeah.
Awesome. They're great. It's a great show. And if you are a fan of classic cinema, they do a great job of, again, talking about the underdog, talking about the people that were like behind the scenes, some great true crime stuff too from Beneath the Hollywood Sign. It's a very fascinating show. I'm glad to be friends and collaborators with them. But now you're here, and you allowed me to pick a few years from your list of years to do, of which Oscar films were we going to do alternative Oscars to, which fits right in line with your book, not even nominated. And we went with 1957's Academy Awards, which would have been the films of 1956. You gave me 3 specific years. What about those years intrigued you?
I guess it was just there were certain movies from those years that I thought would be fun to talk about, and they weren't years where I would just agree with what the Oscars had done. So what was the point of discussing that? So I thought those years I mentioned offered some sort of ripe discussion for the number of classics that were overlooked. And 56 is one of those interesting years, I think. So I was delighted that you picked it.
No, I picked it for one film in particular that I definitely wanted to put on my alternative list, but there's something to be said about, the 1950s being such a landmark year in cinema when it comes to, the technology, the way that we were going to be changing how movies are presented with the advent of television. There was stakes now of giving you a bigger, grander picture, bigger epics. The 50s had something to prove to get people out of their living rooms and these little TV sets. And honestly, man, I feel like we're doing the same thing in the modern times with streaming, getting people back to the theaters, but we're not doing as good a job as they did in the 50s. We're doing it the total capitalistic way, where we're just throwing a bunch of money and intellectual property at the screen and hoping people go to the theater.
Right. Because the 50s, despite all that transition stuff happening, it was kind of a peak decade in so many ways. It's kind of, you could make cases for it being Hitchcock's greatest
Yep.
decade, the greatest decade for Westerns, the greatest decade for musicals. So a lot of really good stuff. And I think it used to get short shrift in, say, 20, 25 years after the decade. The 50s, it's not the golden age, it's not the modern age, it's that in between. But often, if you start looking at great movies, you'll find your list has a lot of movies from the 50s. So,
I agree,
yeah.
especially when you like talking about musicals, but also, the transition of film noir from the 40s and early 50s into what we could call like the modern crime thriller, right? Where people still wanted to see movies about guys down on their luck or criminals, but not as dark, give them some more qualities. Also, we lived in the decades of the compensating values, moral compensation for films, where people had to have like their comeuppance, less dark films like we had in the late 30s and 40s. So, yeah, it's a fascinating decade. And it's not my favorite decade of cinema, but it is the one that I feel like I owe myself more viewing experience, because I did turn my nose up at a lot of 50s cinema just because I'm a child of the 80s and 90s. The way people like don't want to watch black and white movies now, where now it's like, dude, you go back and watch some of those black and white movies, man. Like that's the DNA of the things that you like now. But yeah, 1956 is great. So before we get into that, I had a few points I wanted to point out from your book, like honorable mentions of the selections that you made. So for one, your inclusion of David Tomlinson from Mary Poppins in this, you're 100% right.
Yes. I'm not going to disagree with you.
No. Yeah, well, you wrote it. Kim Darby in True Grit, 100%. I'm not a huge fan of that movie, but I'm a huge fan of her performance. That movie. I have a problem with John Wayne. I definitely have an issue with Pat Boone, but I love that they went with like this strong, boisterous character that really holds their own against such great actors. And yeah, 100%. And I like to see Kim Darby in the 80s and 90s too. She's fun. Sidney Poitier, that's what I always forget in The Heat of the Night. I always forget that he wasn't recognized. He'd been recognized in other things, but that is such an iconic role. It even got 2 sequels of him that a lot of people don't know about.
Sure. Yeah, and he had it was unfortunate that he had 3 big movies in the same year.
Yeah.
The other 2 being To Serve with Love and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. So the theory's always been that he didn't get enough votes for any individual.
He split his own
one.
vote too much.
He probably came in 6th, 7th, and 8th, that nominating roster. Yeah.
And then my favorite pick that's in there probably is Nick Cage in Moonstruck. I think he's more of an iconic character, in my opinion, in that film than Cher is, because Cher is Cher. She's great, but she's Cher. And then Nick Cage, early in his career, showing people that he never phones in a performance. He's going to bring all of his energy and life to whatever role he's in, however he decides to play it. And yeah, that's probably my favorite role of his of the 80s. So yeah, those are great inclusions.
Yeah, he's the one that takes that movie into the stratosphere. It's just this story of a bunch of sad people
Right.
in Brooklyn, and then he enters it, and then it's this sort of modern day opera with the level of his passion and pain and love and lust and everything. And he takes it. We all go soaring away with him.
Well, because
Yeah.
he speaks to the men in the audience. I think that's one of the things that romantic comedies of all generations seem to miss is that they are really focused on, if not just the female viewer, the couple, right? Like a married couple, a relationship couple. They're gonna be, oh, you do that she just did. There's always those little cute little quips, but I think at some point everyone, at least guys, has been Nicolas Cage at some point in their life in this movie. And it speaks to you. Like, I can watch that movie not as a romantic comedy. I'm watching that movie as like, oh my God, I know exactly what he's thinking. So yeah, I think that definitely is an underrated performance and not even nominated, man.
Yeah, yeah. It's crazy when a movie is so beloved and gets a string of nominations, and you think, but wait a minute, the one element that was kind of the magic ingredient is the thing left off the
Right.
list, and that was kind of the impetus for the book. Yeah.
I've never done the research. I want to know how many times he got slapped to get that take.
That I don't know.
Awesome. All right, so 1956. What we're going to do, folks, is we're going to go down the six major categories: picture, director, actor, actress, supporting actor, supporting actress. I'm going to name the films that were nominated and the winner. And then John and I are each going to bring our pick of an alternative Oscar, who we think should have won. Now, I know there's going to be like some nuance to the conversation. It's like, well, maybe someone that we might mention as the winner was nominated. But for the most of mine, a lot of them weren't even in the nomination list to fit with the theme of the book. And I feel like not only should they have been nominated, in my cinema brain, which is the one that matters because it's my podcast, should have won. Since you are my distinguished guest, I'm going to allow you first pick. Now, do you want to start at the bottom with supporting actors and work our way up to picture like they do in the Oscars?
I think that's the way to do it, to build momentum and excitement.
I agree. I think that Steve Ann and I did it differently last year. I think we went picture and then down. So,
Oh,
all right, here
okay.
we go. So, best supporting actress for that year. We had Dorothy Malone for Written on the Wind, Mildred Dunnock for Baby Doll, Eileen Eckert for The Bad Seed, Mercedes McCambridge for A Giant, and Patty McCormick for The Bad Seed. And the winner was Dorothy Malone for Written on the Wind. Now, before we give our who should have won alternative Oscars for this category, we got to talk about the Bad Seed competition here really fast because that's a tough one. You got Eileen Eckert playing one of the most, I'm not going to say convincing, but heartbreaking alcoholics in a film. And then you've got like this little psychopath who does a great job. Everyone knows and everyone admits that the production of this film is very theatrical. It's very stagey, but that's what kind of gives it its fun to me. It's kind of like I'm watching the play, but I'm in the theater, right? What are your thoughts on Bad Seed?
Well, I'm not a big fan of giving Oscars to kids any in general.
Yeah,
So if they wanted to honor her, I would have said give a little special Oscar like they used to do more often in the 30s and
like the
40s and
tiny
say
little
you
one.
were the top. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. We don't want to put too much pressure on you like we did to Tatum O'Neal later,
right.
but we want to honor you. And so if I had to pick between the two of them, I'm more impressed by Eileen Heckert's, total disintegration before our eyes. She's one of the few elements in that movie that you can take totally seriously without it sort of slipping into camp. She's really, really good. I think of the nominees, my favorite though was Mildred Dunnock in Baby Doll. I love her, and she's not doing a part you'd necessarily expect to see her in, and I think she's wonderful. Probably the weakest one is the winner, I would say. Dorothy Malone. She's glamorous and sexy, but it's really just a lot of nose flaring and bosom heaving and
Hmm.
dancing the samba or the mambo. And I never would have thought of her as being nominated if I had just seen the movie when it had come out. So my, I actually have two picks, and then I'll pick the winner.
Yeah, okay, good.
And neither
Because
one of them was
I kind of did
nominated.
the same thing. Go ahead.
Yeah, my two picks would be Marie Windsor in The Killing and Debbie Reynolds in The Catered Affair. And Marie Windsor in The Killing, it's one of the greatest of the bad girl performances of film noir. I mean, she does not have one redeeming quality, and she's also very funny in her nastiness and her emasculation of her husband and her, cheating with her boyfriend and all that stuff. I think she's one of the great, great, great bad girls. But I think I would ultimately pick Debbie Reynolds. Um, right before this, she was still, after Singing in the Rain, but before this, she was in such throwaway movies like Athena and Hit the Deck and Susan Slept Here. There's no inkling that she would be capable of what she does in The Catered Affair. And it's a beautiful, rich, touching performance. And I just think she was terrific in it. Um, and of course, she's playing opposite Betty Davis, who's totally miscast. It was played on television by Thelma Ritter, and the thought of Thelma Ritter doing the scenes with Debbie Reynolds, maybe that would have put both of them in the Oscar race. But the movie's kind of it doesn't quite make it, but Debbie Reynolds is wonderful, and I wish she had gotten that attention early on. I mean, she was terrific way later in Mother, and they ignored her then too. And the only time she got nominated was the unsinkable Molly Brown, which may be my least favorite Debbie Reynolds performance. So there you go.
Yeah, no, those are all great. I picked Mary Windsor too.
Okay.
But I had a feeling that you might have as well. So I have an outside pick. My outside pick was Glynis Johns for The Court Jester, which probably my all-time favorite musical, definitely my favorite Danny Kaye film. And she's just gorgeous and she's great. And she's not necessarily known for that kind of flamboyant comedy, a musical comedy, and she does it so well to be able to keep up with Danny Kaye. And also she carries, a good portion of the movie on her own. Yeah, I just love that performance. And it's great to kind of see her back in action in Mary Poppins. So yeah, Glynis Johns is great. Also, while you were sleeping, forget about it. She's the best part of
Oh,
While
right.
You Were Sleeping.
Right. I that's also my favorite Danny Kaye movie. So I'm glad you mentioned it. Yeah, she's magic, but that's quite an ensemble, that
Oh,
cast.
yeah, it's so good.
You turn around and Mildred Natwick and Basil Rathbone
Angela
and Angela
Lansbury.
Lansbury. Yeah, yeah. So that's a good one. Good one.
Good stuff. Okay, so let's move on to supporting actor. In the nominations, we had Anthony Quinn for Lust for Life, Don Murray for Bus Stop, Anthony Perkins for Friendly Persuasion, Mickey Rooney for The Bold and the Brave, and Robert Stack for Written on the Wind. And the winner was Anthony Quinn. It's funny enough that I've only seen two of those movies, so I really don't have an opinion on the rest. Lust for Life and Friendly Persuasion, I have not seen the others. What would you say about that lineup of people?
I think on that lineup, I would have voted for Anthony Perkins
Hmm.
of the five, even though I'm not actually a big fan of Friendly Persuasion. William Wyler is one of my favorite directors, but that's one of my least favorite William Wyler movies. But I really like Tony Perkins in it. The rest of this, I wouldn't have put the other guys in my top five. Um, but and Don Murray's the star of that movie, so he shouldn't even be
Why he's
there. But
supporting? Interesting, yeah.
yeah, he's not. Arthur O'Connell's the supporting actor in that movie, and Robert Stack I think, does the best acting in Written on the Wind. But and Anthony Quinn, it's a showy, rather small role, but and my actual picks. My top two would be Elijah Cook in The Killing, the man being emasculated by Marie Windsor. But my actual number one pick is Edmund O'Brien in The Girl Can't Help It,
Oh.
which is musical comedy directed by Frank Tashlin. It's like a cartoon come to life. He's playing what is a spoof of a gangster, and he sings and dances to Rock Around the Rock Pile. He's hilariously funny in a kind of Jackie Gleason way. It's all out. It's just unexpected from this guy that had been in a lot of film noir and Julius Caesar, and even in The Barefoot Contessa, where he won the Oscar. Um, it's so delightful. And it is one of those performances that I was in my book, 100 Great Film Performances You Should Remember, but probably don't, because I knew a lot of people probably hadn't seen it, and they probably didn't know that Edmund O'Brien could be so funny.
Right. So my pick was Elisha Cook Jr. for The Killing. Obviously, we've kind of figured out that that was the movie I wanted to talk about for 1956.
Yes.
And
Yes.
my big thing with Elisha Cook Jr. in movies is you can never have enough Elisha Cook Jr. And this movie gave him a lot to do, and thank God for it. But yeah, like the monologue that he has when he comes in, he talks about how he saw the people, and he calls her Donut, and she's just so passive against him. And that movie, the way that they really kind of give you, I mean, what's it called? Unlinear timeline. Doing it before a lot of people were doing it, especially Tarantino, where you get to see the insights behind these people and the reason why they are doing what they're doing and why they're getting in on this deal. It's such a great picture for that kind of character building and storytelling, where you get to pick your favorite person involved in this heist for whatever reason. And mine's always been Elisha Cook Jr. in that performance in that film. It's just a great, great performance.
I agree. And I don't think he ever had a part that was better in anything.
I don't
I
think
can't
so.
think of one.
Not that I've seen. You've probably seen more films of his than mine. Memorable wise, maybe Rosemary's Baby, just the beginning, right? But
And I was thinking of him from The Maltese Falcon, because that was
right.
kind of the first time he got, I think, really, really noticed. Um, but it's a terrific part, and he is sympathetic as well. And yeah, I mean, it's a shame that movie. I'm sure it's going to come up in our discussion as it proceeds, but it's a shame it wasn't more appreciated in its day. Of course, now it is completely
Mhm.
regarded as a film noir masterpiece. So time will tell, as they say.
Right. And, there have been like those kind of, cuck characters in lots of movies before this one. I think this one made it very memorable. I did an episode where we talked about, character DNA, what the certain trope of a character roots from. And I made a connection of his character in The Killing to William H. Macy in Fargo, right? Like it's very similar. I think that when you get that kind of character who is just so pitiful and insecure, but they get a little balls in them and it never works out. I love that story. I love following that kind of character. And it's always a woman, right? It's almost always a woman that gets him to do it.
In film noir, it's always the woman. Right, right,
Excellent choice. All right. I love that we're kind of like on par with each other so far. Okay, moving up to actress. So, for 1956, the nominees for Best Actress were Ingrid Bergman for Anastasia, Carol Baker for Baby Doll, Katharine Hepburn for The Rainmaker, Nancy Kelly for The Bad Seed, and Deborah Kerr for The King and I. Ingrid Bergman was the winner for Anastasia. Now, good performances. I can tell you right now, kicking some off my list. I am not a fan of the Nancy Kelly performance in Bad Seed. I think it's just really, really theatrical. I think that she's just doing too much. But back then, I think doing too much was okay, especially when she's pounding the table and it makes the mics go hot. I've always had an issue with that scene. Deborah Kerr, I think, is fantastic in The King and I. Katharine Hepburn for me is kind of Katharine Hepburn and everything. So of the list on this, Carol Baker would probably be my favorite of this list. What about yours?
Well, continuing about Nancy Kelly, I would go further and say it's possibly the worst performance ever nominated in the Best Actress category.
See, I
And
knew we'd be friends.
it's shocking because, and fascinating actually, because she won the Tony Award when it played on Broadway, which means there was a certain level of effectiveness. Now, something really bad happened in the transition, and one of the things that's obvious is that there isn't one moment of spontaneity in the film performance. She's literally doing what she had done
Right.
several hundred
And it's
times
obvious.
without changing one thing. And not all of it is working. And some of it is hilarious.
Right.
And so the fact that the Academy fell for that, and it left out some really good people from the list, that blows my mind. I like Ingrid Bergman's performance very much. It was also, her big
Yeah.
comeback from her Scandal, and I'm fine with that as the winner. I love Deborah Carr. The fact that she doesn't do her own singing, you have to take some points off when you're not doing everything that the role requires of you, but she's perfect in the acting aspect of it. And Carol Baker is very good as well. Um, Before I give you my pick, there are two performances that are not my pick that I love that I wish they could have had room for. Is one is Grace Kelly in The Swan.
Hmm.
It's not as good a movie as Rear Window, but I think it's probably her best performance. It's the most sensitive, human, touching performance that she ever gave. And it was sort of revealing how good she was getting on her way out the door. And so I love that film and I love her in it. And the other one is Elizabeth Taylor in Giant. Now, uh, I like Giant. I don't think it's a great movie. It's a very good movie. The two guys got nominated. They're both good. But for me, Elizabeth Taylor is that movie. And she's the driving force. She's the character we're with. She's the one standing up to everybody and telling it like it is. And we like her, and she's smart and she's strong. And I'd say like the first 2/3 of that movie, or at least the first half, are carried by her. And then it sort of loses something once they all have to wear all that age makeup for the last
Mm.
chunk of
Hmm.
it. But my final pick would be Marilyn Monroe and Bus Stop, the movie that was supposed to prove to the world that she learned a lot at the Actors
She
Studio.
can act.
And I think it did because she's phenomenal. And it's certainly not the best movie she's in, but the best performance she ever gave. So beautifully vulnerable, so hilariously funny. And her portrait of an untalented musical performer is so brilliant. I could watch it over and over again and always see something new. But ultimately, it's that vulnerability, which she usually had anyway. But it's a good part, and it gives her places to put all that sensitivity. And I think her not being nominated when they did go with Nancy Kelly, when they did go with another blonde, Carol Baker, it seemed like such a deliberate snub and
Mm.
so undeserved. So I wholeheartedly tout Marilyn.
It's an interesting thing. Like, I wonder, because I can't think off the top of my head of the nominees from the years previous or prior within the 50s. But I feel like we still weren't in the era of, to win an Academy Award, at least I'm going to say from like the 70s onward, you start to get appreciation for people who, let's say, had physical disabilities or mental disabilities, the ugly down performances, and like Charlize Theron, a monster. We started seeing a lot of that, getting a lot of recognition from the Academy. But when you think about, let's say, the golden era of Hollywood, you definitely saw there was poise was a part of the formula, right? Not just in the performance, but also like in real life. The scandal sheets were very crucial to a career and recognition and how you were presented and perceived as a performer. And I feel like decade after decade that changed a little bit and the rules changed and the guidelines changed. And I kind of think that leads into, my pick for, not even nominated alternative Oscar. I'm a huge fan of Jane Wyman in Miracle in the Rain. I'm a sucker for like the homely girl falls in love with a man for one day story, right? How I got onto this movie is I'm a huge fan of the Nancy Zavoca film Dogfight with Lily Taylor and River Phoenix. And someone mentioned, oh, you should watch Miracle in the Rain if you like movies about like homely girls that like kind of fall in love with a soldier. And I did. And she brings just that insecure mousiness, but also an inner confidence where it's like, I'm not going to let the perception that people have of me and my appearance and my personality and my bookishness get me down. And I love those kind of movies. And I think she's so great in it. And no one really talks about that movie or that performance. So this was my opportunity to throw that into the list.
Yeah, no, I like Jane Wyman a lot, and she did have quite a. That's another fascinating career to go from like extra to bit player to second banana, and then suddenly you've won an Oscar and you're a serious dramatic actress, and then you're one of the queens of the movies through from the late 40s to the late 50s, and of course then coming back to television. I think with Jane Wyman, even in those early bit parts and in those comic sidekick parts, there is an essential truthfulness to whatever she does. And the fact that she did have a range, she could play very dopey sidekicks. And then she's so moving in Johnny Belinda, for which she won the Oscar. She's so fiercely strong in The Yearling. And you really could give her almost kind of anything. She could be in a light comedy with Bing Crosby and sing an Oscar-winning song. So, yeah, she's a good one to mention because we don't really talk about her that much in terms of women of that era. But so that's a good one. I like that.
I think there is, I don't know, being too much of a chameleon can be to a disadvantage if you're seeking awards, because I feel like sometimes those performers, both male and female actors and actresses, do get stuck in that, oh, we're going to be funny this one, we're going to be a slasher in this one, right? And you can tell the ones that do it for the work, and when they get recognized or honored even, it's a great thing. And then there are actors who literally only take Oscar bait. I'm not going to name names, but I think we all know who they are, especially in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. But I just love being able to see what you just mentioned, that you can have a performer that just does their own thing and you're watching them for them. And regardless of what character, dramatic, funny, scary, frightened, tortured, there's still an element of them and that truth into it. And I think you're right. She is definitely a reflection of that.
And I think she, the female audience of the 40s and 50s, she was one of the women they had a devotion for. I mean, a lot of her films you could tag as soaps, but they were female-centric stories usually. And I think they went to see her movies. She wasn't a glamour girl who was going to, that kind of, she wasn't Lana Turner or Jane Russell. She wasn't that kind of thing. And she wasn't really a Thelma Ritter. She was like someone you could know. She could literally live on your block and be a friend. And I think people responded to that kind of authenticity about her and would go to whatever she was in to see, in terms of trusting. I trust Jane Wyman. She won't let me down, kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah. And to Marilyn's detriment, great as she is in Bus Stop, was the fact that it was still a sexy role. So even though she's playing it beautifully, she went to the actor's studio, it's an Inge play, Joshua Logan's directing it, she's still sexy. So she would have had to pull a country girl and take off all her makeup and wear a cardigan for them to say, okay, Marilyn, you proved yourself.
Now you can win an Oscar.
Yeah, but she never did that, so it never happened.
Oh, shame, shame, shame. Okay, I like that part. I like that conversation. Okay, moving on to actor now. The nominees for 1957 or 56 films were Yul Brynner for The King and I, James Dean, posthumously, for Giant, Kirk Douglas for Lust for Life, Rock Hudson for Giant, and Laurence Olivier for Richard III. Ooh, that's a stacked list of nominees. Yul Brynner was the winner for The King and I, and there's something I have to say really fast about why Deborah Kerr I liked so much in that nominations list with Yul Brynner, and that is the chemistry. Like, they're both great actors, but you can't deny that there are some performances that are paired with another performance that brings out the best in both. And that is one of my major examples, is the chemistry between the two of them in King and I feel that is exactly... Wasn't it Rex Harrison that was in the original?
He was in the non-musical version. Anna and the King of Siam, with a full head of hair.
No chemistry, right? I like Rex Harrison, but Yul Brynner and Deborah Kerr, that chemistry was thick. He was the winner, I think, the reason why he is so good in that movie is because he feeds off her energy and vice versa.
Yeah, and he had done the musical on Broadway. He was unknown
Right.
essentially, but when he played it on Broadway, it was opposite Gertrude Lawrence, who was significantly older than he was. So it did not have that quality on the stage at the same level that it does in the movie. And you're right, I agree. They really have something electric going. Now, of course, in Yul Brynner's case, in terms of winning, he was also in two other of the biggest movies of the year, opposite Ingrid Bergman and her Oscar-winning performance, and of course as Ramses in the Ten Commandments.
Big year.
And he never had another year like that
No.
again. Few people ever do. And he's really excellent in all three.
Yeah.
He's the subtlest thing in the Ten Commandments, and he plays opposite Bergman really well too. So he's not my pick, but I certainly have no problem with him winning. And Olivier in Richard III, it's a great stage
It's
performance.
Shakespeare, you know.
But it's also not as cinematic a film as his Henry V or
Right.
his Hamlet. It's beautiful, the color's gorgeous, he's excellent, but it's almost like, how do you sort of rate something that almost doesn't feel like a movie with actual movies? So I get it, he's great, but I wouldn't pick him either. And I like Kirk Douglas does a very good job trying to tone down his Kirk Douglasness and not be quite as robust as he wants to be. And
Pulls the chin back a little bit for this
yeah, he's
performance.
trying, and he obviously looks like Van Gogh, and he has some very touching moments too. But again, he wouldn't be my pick. And I mentioned the two giant guys as perfectly fine, but it's Elizabeth Taylor's
Yeah.
movie. So again, it comes down to two, and one I bet a lot of your listeners have never even heard of this movie, and I can't even remember how I first stumbled upon it, but it's one of my favorite little sleepers. It's a movie called Come Next Spring,
Mm.
and I'm talking about Steve Cochran's performance. And if people know Steve Cochran, they know him as a great film noir bad guy, usually in a black shirt, black tie, black jacket, sexy and up to no good in movies like White Heat, or even in The Best Years of Our Lives, he's a louse. And here he is as this alcoholic who ran out on his family in 1920s Arkansas, left his wife and children, and has been gone. I think 9 years, and has been 3 years sober, and comes back and tries to integrate himself, prove himself to his family to accept him, that he's different. And he's amazing in it. It's a beautiful character arc to play. He's got some beautiful speeches, and it's one of those little movies we're talking about that I like to tout and say, if you see this title go by and you think, what the heck is that? Watch it. Ann Sheridan, I'm also a fan of hers, and she plays the wife. So I'm not surprised he wasn't nominated. Nobody saw
I
it,
haven't seen it. I
but
just put it on my list.
yeah, I hope I haven't overstated it, but sometimes you have to do that to make people hear you and go, I guess I should check it out. But I like him in pretty much everything. But this, again, like with Elijah Cook Jr., they almost never got opportunities like this.
Correct.
And if the movie doesn't take off at the box office, they're unlikely to get those again. But ultimately, though, my pick would be John Wayne and the Searchers,
Oh, okay.
because he did what I don't think anyone thought he was capable of doing, um, digging into this rather increasingly ugly character and going for broke and not backtracking at all, and watching the transition of what he becomes on the search, and then the redemption at the end, and this man's isolation from the first scene to the last. It couldn't have been acted by anyone any better than John Wayne. Now, at this point, he'd already been pretty great in Red River and She Wore a Yellow Ribbon. But this is the one not True Grit, or not anything that came
I do
after
not like him in
anything
True
else that
Grit
came
at
out.
all. I do not like
Yeah.
Rooster Cogburn
So,
character
but
in that.
this one, like I said, there's no hedging. He really goes for it, and uh, there are some terrifying moments in this movie. Just the expressions on his face, or the way he says the things he says, and
It's dark. It's
uh,
yeah.
and even though that movie was popular, again, it wasn't something that was considered great. it got no nominations of any kind. And so, with all the many collaborations he did with John Ford, I think it is certainly the best. And I certainly wasn't one of the first people to stumble upon The Searchers and start touting it. I came late to that party, but I do agree with the assessment, and particularly John Wayne's performance.
Yeah, like I'm not a huge John Wayne fan, and I should be because my mom loves John Wayne. I grew up watching all the John Wayne movies with my mom, and the three that I like the best is Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, The Searchers, and funny enough, I love the Cowboys. I think he brings something very special to that, especially like with the kids. Roscoe Lee Brown, like everyone in that movie just like works well with each other. Those are my three favorites. But yeah, The Searchers by far, I agree with you on that one. It's not my pick for Best Actor, but if you're bringing the John Wayne movie to the table, it's definitely that for sure. My pick for Best Actor, not even nominated, probably didn't win, James Mason in Bigger Than Life. Talk about a downer of a movie. I mean, it's Nicholas Ray, right? It's that dramatic melodrama of the 50s, but I love James Mason in anything, villain or not. But in this one, it's different because you take that journey, that downward spiral with him as he becomes addicted to cortisone and has like a god complex. And that's one of my favorite moments of the movie is like when he's about to do something terrible to his son and he's going through all of his biblical references and his wife's like, well, God told, Abraham not to. And then he says, God was wrong. That's like a horror movie and the way he delivers it, right? So that to me, since being like, I don't know, 9 or 10 when I first saw that and then watching it over the decades to understand more of it as an adult, oh, it's such a gripping performance. I love it so much. So that was my pick for.
And that moment when the bathroom mirror breaks and you see two, it's like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in the mirror. That's a chilling moment too. Yeah, I love James Mason too. I wish he could have won for A Star Is Born, but of course Marlon Brando had to win for On the Waterfront, right. And I wouldn't take that away from him. The other, I love James Mason also in Five Fingers, the great spy movie, and Lolita. I think, again, talk about really just going for it and not caring how, have I gone too far? Will they run me out of town?
Right.
He's extraordinary. That performance could have been done today. He's a great actor. I'm glad you mentioned him.
My personal favorite towards the latter end of his career is Last of Sheila, where he is almost strangled by a pair of puppets.
And also in The Verdict, which I think is probably Paul Newman's best performance.
Love The Verdict.
But even Paul Newman's not as good as James Mason is in that movie. So even at his best, you can't top James Mason.
Agreed. I should just do a James Mason podcast. I love the dude so much. And he's got so many movies.
His grandson, he's very out there on social media. Uh-huh. James Duke Mason, I've seen him, and he loves to talk about his grandfather.
I think he might have been on Gilbert Gottfried's podcast. Gilbert always got daughters, granddaughters, grandsons of people that were passed on. So yeah. All right, we're getting to the top two now. We're getting close. So Best Director, we had nominees George Stevens for Giant, Michael Anderson for Around the World in 80 Days, William Wyler for Friendly Persuasion, Walter Lang for The King and I, and King Vidor for War and Peace. King Vidor already like 30 years in the game, essentially.
Sure. I don't think any of the five I wrote down were mentioned just now. Not my picks, but not my final pick, but certainly Minnelli deserves points for creating the world of Van Gogh so beautifully. The whole movie looks like a painting.
It does.
The painstaking care that Minnelli brought to that movie deserves to be a nominee. Same goes for Elia Kazan for Baby Doll. That is such an evocation of a place. That deep South atmosphere that just hangs. You feel the heat. That is so good. That's one of the best of the Tennessee Williams films. I'd also include Frank Tashlin, again, for making a cartoon come to life and sustaining it for feature length. and certainly Kubrick for making one of the great film noir pictures of all time with The
You would
Killing.
think that that was my
But
pick, but it's not.
now I'm thinking it's Nicholas Ray, but I have to keep going with the Searchers on this one because I think I have to go with John Ford. And I'm not a crazy John Ford person at all, but when he really hits it, he hits it. And I do love Stagecoach, and I do love My Darling Clementine and Rio Grande. Um, but and The Searchers has its flaws, but there are some of the most beautiful pictures of cinematic um, compositions. That's the word of in this movie. Those doorway shots, the colors that come. I mean, so much of it is so beautiful, but it's not just a visual feast. Of course, the emotion in that movie, particularly, I didn't mention talking about John Wayne. That whole totally unspoken love between John Wayne and his sister-in-law in the first, say, 20 minutes of the movie. Nobody says a word, and yet you can't miss what's going on. And of course, that's part of what's carrying John Wayne through the rest of the movie. Another one of the things roiling within him. Um, uh, so there's so many things about it. And John Ford won 4 Oscars as Best Director, but I would trade any one of those for an award for The Searchers.
Indeed, that's my pick too. John Ford for The Searchers. It's the it's the prettiest Western, I think, at least American Western of its day. It's so great, and it's been emulated so many times, and openly too. Like no one denies. Like Tarantino does not deny that. Oh yeah, I stole so many shots from The Searchers for Inglorious Bastards. Scorsese preaches about The Searchers. And of course, everyone makes that Taxi Driver Searchers comparison, which yeah, I get it. It's there.
Oh yeah,
It's there for the modern
sure.
ages for sure. But yeah, the cinematography, and then the fact that when I watched that the Fablemans movie and David Lynch plays John Ford and he's talking about where's the horizon. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
he's not. There's no pictures of the Searchers in the office, but you know what he's talking about because that's how he shoots it, and that is
Yeah.
it is one of the most glorious shot films ever for sure. And yeah, how could this not even be in the running for Best Director of 1956? I don't get it.
Right, right. Yeah. Um, so moving on to the big one.
Let's go on the big one. We're on the last one, everybody. The Best Picture for the 1957 awards. We have Around the World in 80 Days by Mike Todd, Friendly Persuasion, William Wyler, Giant, George Stevens and Henry Ginsberg, The King and I, Charles Brackett, and The Ten Commandments, Cecil B. DeMille. These are all producers, some of them directors. The winner that year was Around the World in 80 Days. And I gotta tell you, bro, I have never made it all the way through that movie.
How many days did you
Right.
get
I think I'm at
before
day
you dropped off?
66 and then I fell asleep again.
Yeah, you got 60 days and I'm done or
Oh my
something.
God.
I was thinking about that again because we were going to talk about it, and I've even seen that one on the big screen. And you have to, I guess, try to put your head back to 1956, where the only explanation for it winning is that it was the event of the
Mhm.
year. Everyone had to see the widescreen Todd AO, the cameo performances. Everyone's in it. They're going all over the world. The music's beautiful. It was the event. And I'm sure probably within 2 years, people were thinking, what were we thinking? Who thought that was the best movie of 1956? And I don't think you could probably find anybody who today would say, wow, they got that one right.
Right.
It's not terrible. It's just kind of a very pleasant little piffle. And I wouldn't even think of it in the top 12 or, whatever. But at least with the Ten Commandments, also not a great movie, but you got to hand it to Cecil B. DeMille having a style and sort of giving the audience what it wants. And I just screened that over the Easter Passover holidays on the big screen
Right.
and it goes over because again you get into a world of Cecil B. DeMille and you're laughing in inappropriate places, but I would choose it over Around the World in 80 Days because at least it's has a unifying vision,
Yeah.
cracked as it sometimes appears to be, but um, So of the other ones, yeah, I wouldn't put any of the five. Although The King and I is one of the better movie versions of a Broadway musical that would come down the pike. So that was at least a very good um, adaptation. But again, I would probably think of the ones I've been mentioning over and over as the best movies of the year, and come down to probably, like I said, Baby Doll, Girl Can't Help It, The Killing, and The Searchers, and probably going with The Searchers as the big one.
Yeah. No, I agree with you 100%. I put The Killing and The Searchers as my top two, with The Searchers as number one. The Killing is more of like the one that I wanted, right? But if we're looking at things realistically, big picture wise, which I don't think matters as much in today's parlance, that's something that Stephen Nan and I talked about on our episode, where I was talking about the Seahawk, where spectacle, that was too early for spectacle movies to be taken seriously. And then once you get into like the 50s and 60s, I mean, Around the World in the 80 Days is the perfect example of spectacle equals big picture, right? So I put that on there. I have a super wild dark horse, though, that I knew didn't have a chance, but I wanted to talk about it because it came out in this year. And I was having a hard time of figuring out what category to put it in. I gotta say that I am a huge fan of Ishiro Honda's Rodan. It's my favorite kaiju movie. It's my favorite. I think it's the best made of all the Japanese Toho kaiju movies when it comes to, it's a good story. It's a good movie. It doesn't feel like we're just waiting for the special effects and the monster scenes. And as hokey as they are, the special effects, I think, stand above any of the Godzilla films or any of the MonsterVerse films. I think Rodan is a very special movie, and it doesn't really belong on this list, but I wanted to talk about it. I'd say I'd probably put it in director, because Ishiro Honda is an amazing director of that film, where I care about what's going on and I'm not just waiting for the monster fights.
I have to say, I haven't seen that since I was a kid. So I would have to. I'll write that one down and try to see that now. I thought you were going to say Invasion of the Body Snatchers,
I
because that
almost put
is,
Kevin McCarthy as a dark horse in there just
yeah,
for the
'cause
last
that is
scene.
another unrecognized at the time as a classic
Right.
that truly is a classic. And I wouldn't have argued if you had said it was your best picture.
I think Don
because
Siegel's a great director too, man. I love Don Siegel.
right. So that would be, and as much as I love The Searchers, it's not a perfect movie. I usually have a problem in most John Ford movies when he tries to be funny, and I usually get impatient with like the barroom brawls, like the one in She Wore a Yellow
Yeah.
Ribbon, or the treatment of the Native American wife in The Searchers, or even the Jeffrey Hunter Vera Miles scenes. I guess they serve as nice breaks between all the seething revenge, and they probably serve their purpose in the storytelling. But generally, John Ford, when he goes funny, I'm usually not laughing, I have to say, but it's totally forgivable, because, as I said, I still think it was the movie of the year. But there are probably other movies like Body Snatchers or Rodan, those little uh, pictures that would, of course, never get any kind of award respect, that if you really take a serious glance at them now and say, but hey, come on, it's better than a lot of the stuff people were touting as so-called, in quotes, serious work.
Oh, I agree with you 100%. No, this was a lot of fun. And, going back in the 50s, which I have to say is probably my least appreciated era of cinema, at least in my wheelhouse, because I'm a sucker for 60s, psychedelic, new Hollywood. I'm up in them. That's like my eras of fascination. But then I'm also really into noir. I've gotten really into pre-code with a friend of mine that's his obsession. The 50s is kind of like the ugly stepchild in my cinematic appreciation. So I'm glad that we were able to do this, and it's getting me excited to go look at some more films, especially was it come next spring. It's on my list.
Yeah. Well, what's good about 1956 too is because if you just look at the Oscar list, you'll say, yeah, it looks kind of underwhelming.
Right.
But most of what we talked about were not the winners, or often not the nominees, and so there's all these riches if you just scratch the surface.
Which is,
so we did
that's
that.
my podcast. Like, it is not just cult films, but films that would be worthy of a cult if people just knew what they were. if they found them and get the exposure out there. And just to say, like, come next spring on Letterboxd, as I added it to my list, it only has 383 reviews. That's nothing. So yeah, let's get people watching that one. I'm excited.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, just a little gem that probably ended up being better than anyone intended it to be
Yeah.
because they had no money to make it.
No,
So
excellent.
anyway,
I love doing episodes like this. I love this conversation. Thank you so much for bringing this year. It was so fun to go back and revisit. I watched a few of these, went back and read a bunch of them. I mean, I didn't have to watch Bigger Than Life over again because I don't think that movie will ever leave me because it's so much of a movie. But yeah, thank you so much. So before we let you go, man, let's give you an opportunity to talk a little bit more about Not Even Nominated and where people can find you online, your social media, and maybe what's coming next in your world.
sure. So yeah, Not Even Nominated. The subtitle's 40 overlooked co-stars of Oscar-winning performances. So in every case, somebody in the movie won the Oscar, and right next to that person is someone just as good or better who wasn't even nominated. As we said earlier, Nicolas Cage next to the winner, Cher. It starts in 1927 with Charles Farrell not being nominated when Janet Gaynor won for Seventh Heaven. And it goes up to Tom Hanks being overlooked for Bridge of Spies when Mark Rylance won. So it's 40. Of course, it's very subjective. They're fairly evenly spread out through the decades. So I am working on a new book that I've just started. I'm not allowed to talk about it, but it should be out in 2027. Yes, I'm on Facebook, of course. I'm on Instagram,
Right.
Jon.DiLeo.12. And I have an author page on Amazon, and of course, Amazon's always the easiest way to get the books. So this book is number 8. I'm working on number 9.
Well, again, I can't appreciate you enough to send me this hardcover copy. It looks so great with all my other books right here, and it's the first time a guest has actually sent me a copy of their book. I've bought a few of theirs because I wanted to be well read, but you offered to send it to me, and I am just so taken with that. So thank you so much.
I'm so glad. You're very welcome.
Everyone, please go subscribe to his Instagram, follow him on Facebook, check out his other books on Amazon. And as for me, you know where to find me at thecultworthy.com, where you can find links to all of my podcasts, blogs, essays, and links to my Cultworthy partners who I've had on the show in the Cultworthy Partners page. Jon, thank you so much for joining me, and we'll have to do this again sometime before the next book comes out. We'll do another alternative Oscars episode.
Yeah, pick your turn to pick a year, and I'll be back. Yes,
oh,
thank you so
awesome.
much.
Yeah, I'm going to probably pick something really skeezy.
Yeah, just don't pick one where we love all the winners and then we're boring.
Right, indeed. I'll start thinking, okay. All right, everyone, thank you so much. Jon, I'll see you later.
All right, take care.